Hello everyone, and welcome to Game of Thrones Death Battles, where we throw characters from the A Song of Ice and Fire universe into the arena and see who would win in a fantasy duel to the death. Now, being that this is the very first episode, I decided to start at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to combatants, simply because I would like to get some suggestions from the viewers on how to make the content better before we start using more popular ones. So please be sure to stop by the comment section to let me know how to improve this channel for future content. Also, I'll be explaining which characters will qualify for the death battles at the end of the video, so be sure to stick around for that. Now, without further ado, let's get started. For the first Game of Thrones death battle, we are matching up Sir Meryn Trant against Sir Arys Oakheart, two knights of the current and recent Kingsguard that are not particularly known for being the best warriors. So before we analyze the fight, we're going to get some basic info, weapon and armor info, and we'll take a look at the combat accomplishments of both men. Then after we do all that, I'll give a description of how I personally can see this fight playing out. Starting off, we have Sir Meryn Trant, hailing from the Stormlands. House Trant of Gallows Grey are the sworn bannermen of House Baratheon of Storm's End. Their sigil is the hangman on a field of azure, and their house words are, "So end our foes." Being a sworn member of the Kingsguard, Sir Meryn Trant uses heavy armaments for combat. His armor includes a shirt of enameled scales chased with gold, a tall helm with a golden sunburst crest, greaves, a gorget, gauntlets, and boots of gleaming plate, along with a heavy wool cloak clasped with a golden lion. His weaponry is mostly just a one-handed sword, but being a tourney knight, he is also familiar with use of a lance and shield, which also implies he's familiar with cavalry combat, at least to a certain degree. As mentioned earlier, Meryn is not very renowned for his accomplishments as a warrior, but as a member of the Kingsguard, he has been a protector to King Robert Baratheon, King Joffrey Baratheon, and King Tommen Baratheon, as well as Queen Regent Cersei Lannister. After King Robert Baratheon named Eddard Stark the successor to Jon Arryn as Hand of the King, a tourney was held in Eddard's honor. Sir Meryn participated in said joust and managed to unhorse Harwin, the stable master of Winterfell. Later in the same tourney, however, he was unhorsed by Loras Tyrell. Another tourney Sir Meryn participated in was the tourney held on King Joffrey's name day, during which he broke 2 lances with Sir Haber Redwine, but also managed to unhorse him. Unfortunately, that tourney had no clear winner after it was declared over by King Joffrey after the Ser Dantis incident. At the Battle of the Blackwater, Sir Meryn was ordered to guard King Joffrey, but being that the ill-born king was too craven to actually participate in the battle, Meryn's involvement in it was basically non-existent. During the Great Riot of King's Landing, Meryn Trant held guard to the royal procession on its return to the Red Keep after seeing Princess Myrcella off to Dorne. During this event, Sansa Stark disappeared into the crowd and he was sent in search of her, but was unsuccessful and she was instead returned by the Hound Sandor Clegane. Even though it's unconfirmed, I personally assume that Sir Meryn probably defeated many a starving small folk during that conflict. Though it's easy to judge Meryn Trant for not being a warrior of great merit, he does have a significant kill in the books and show, namely Syrio Forel the Water Dancer and sword fighting instructor to Arya Stark. As I'm sure all of you watching know, he accomplished this kill after Ned Stark was seized by King Joffrey. Sir Meryn was then ordered to capture Arya, and his plan was thwarted by the mostly unarmed Syrio. And even though Syrio's death is unconfirmed, it's heavily implied that the Braavosi man was slain by the Large Knight. Moving on to our next combatant, we have Sir Arys Oakheart, also known as the White Knight. The House Oakheart hail from Old Oak in the Reach, and are sworn to House Tyrell. They bear the sigil of 3 leaves on a field of gold, and their words are, "Our roots go deep." Like his opponent, Sir Arys was also a member of the Kingsguard, so his armor was similar with the exception of having the golden oak tree of House Oakheart decorating his tunic. And he was known to switch between white cloaks of heavy wool, light wool, and silk. I can only assume the heavy wool he would use during cold weather, the light for hot weather, and the silk purely for formal occasions. Arys' armor isn't explained in quite as much detail like Meryn's is, with the exception of his cloak and tunic, so to be safe, I'm going to assume that Arys' armor is slightly lighter as far as a gorget, boots, and gauntlets go, giving him a slight disadvantage in his defenses compared to Sir Meryn's. The White Knight also participated in tourneys, so he too would be familiar with single-handed swords, lances, shields, and cavalry combat. We have very little information about his abilities as a tourney fighter, but we do know that he too participated in the Hands tourney and Joffrey's Name Day tourney. Though, unfortunately, it's not mentioned how well he does in the Hands, and Joffrey's tourney is abruptly ended, as I stated earlier. But I feel like if he had done well in the Hands tourney, it would have been mentioned, so without conclusive evidence, I'd say the safer bet would be to assume that he's nothing spectacular at jousting. As Kingsguard, he is assigned to be Myrcella Baratheon's personal guardian when she's shipped off to Dorne. Sadly for him, he falls in love with Prince Doran Martell's daughter Arianne and is killed by Captain Arys Oakheart of the Household Guard after being involved in a plot to usurp King Tommen Baratheon and replace him with his sister. But during the conflict, he does manage to slay 2 Dornish soldiers, which tells us that he was not completely incompetent as a warrior. I mean, hell, the fact that Cersei even trusted him to protect her daughter out of all 7 members of the Kingsguard is pretty good testament to his fighting abilities when you think about it. Now that we have all that out of the way, let's get to the fight. Both men being Kingsguard, I'm sure they'd want to battle on horseback, something they're both familiar with. To Meryn's credit, he isn't what I'd call the worst at doing this, being that he has a few jousting victories under his belt. This would give him a huge advantage at the beginning of the fight if he was using a lance, though it might not be quite as effective after one initial charge. The lance as a weapon wasn't designed for much more than that, and upon closing the gap between combatants, it would be more of a detriment to the wielder than helpful due to its long length. However, if used effectively, it could be devastating and either end the battle instantly with a well-placed stab to the enemy's exposed weak points, or even unhorse the opponent, giving the lance wielder a huge advantage for the rest of combat. When it comes to swordplay, I think Ser Arys would have the greater advantage. Though Arys has never claimed to be a great swordsman in the novels, Meryn is notoriously known to be a terrible one. The Hound even calls him out on this.
The greatest swordsman who ever lived, killed by Meryn fucking Trant.
He was outnumbered.
Any boy whore with a sword could beat 3 Meryn Trant.
One thing we can look at that the novels give us a lot of information about these 2 men is their mentalities, which differ greatly. As active members of King Joffrey's guard, both men on separate occasions are ordered to beat Sansa Stark for nothing more than Joffrey's sadistic pleasure. Though both men participate in the horrible act, their responses to it are polar opposites. Meryn Trant feels indifferent, if not pleased by thrashing the young girl, while Arys is remorseful of the awful deed. Sansa even credits Ser Arys by saying he took it a bit easier on her than Ser Meryn did. This alone tells us a lot about both men. Arys aspires to be the classical hero knight we often hear about in fairy tales. As a child, he dreamed of being a knight of the Kingsguard, as we can imagine most children with fantasies of being a hero might. He's a romantic and chivalrous man that probably doesn't desire the power of being Kingsguard so much as he does the glory of being one. Meryn, on the other hand, is a bit of a bully, an authoritative figure who gets drunk on the little bit of power that being a royal bodyguard might give him. Jaime Lannister describes him as being cruel, and his arrogance towards Syrio also implies so. These character traits can put both fighters at an advantage and disadvantage when it comes to combat against each other. On one hand, Ser Arys Oakheart's heroism makes him brave. In A Dance with Dragons, when facing impossible odds, he doesn't hesitate to charge headfirst into battle when facing the Dornish ambush. There's a certain amount of confidence you need when performing a difficult task in order to be successful, but too much confidence can also be detrimental, as we also learned from Arys' death. Charging into battle as outnumbered as Arys was goes beyond bravery and could be considered downright stupid. We can also attribute this to his pride, which definitely can hurt his odds of defeating Ser Meryn. So this is how I can see the fight actually going. We'll start off with a joust, since they're both tourney knights and it'll make this whole thing more fun. The combatants make 2 passes at each other before their lances are rendered useless, ending with neither of them being unhorsed. But I do see Arys getting the worst end of these exchanges, whether that being taking a slight injury or even just getting a bit rattled. After being forced to draw their swords, they make smaller passes at each other while getting much closer during these exchanges than they did with their lances. Eventually it comes to a head-on sword fight from horseback, where their riding consists of little more than 2 men circling each other while swinging, occasionally at small windows of opportunity. While they sword fight, they both take minor injuries, with Ser Arys landing more blows that do less damage due to Ser Meryn's heavy armor, and Meryn drawing more blood, but landing less blows due to Arys being much faster. To make things more exciting, let's say that the horses collide with each other, causing them to rear up and the men to be thrown from their saddles because, I mean, why not? Upon hitting the ground, both men take a moment to regain their footing, Meryn being exhausted from battling in heavy armor, and Arys being exhausted from his minor wounds. Eventually, both men make it to their feet and begin fighting once more. Swords clash against shields, and little progress is made due to fatigue. Occasionally, they even allow each other to rest for a brief moment, with whoever feels recovered enough advancing in on their enemy before they have a chance to do the same. This is when the panic starts to set in. Meryn, realizing that Arys isn't going to die as easily as he expected him to, starts trying to figure out a way to escape the battle. Arys' panic comes in the form of clarity, realizing how close to death he might be. The result of this distracts Ser Meryn and causes Ser Arys to go into an almost berserker state. Arys slashes rapidly with fury at Meryn's chest and head, while Meryn lifts his shield high in an almost completely defensive form. Arys, realizing that Meryn has left his lower half exposed, manages to land a good strike to Ser Meryn's leg at a weak spot in his greaves. Upon receiving receiving this slash, Meryn lowers his shield, and with one mighty jab, Sir Meryn receives a blade to his throat from Sir Arys, and the life leaves his eyes before his body slumps to the ground defeated, leaving Sir Arys Oakheart the victor of our very first death battle. So before we go any further, I just want to state that I don't believe my opinions to be conclusive. I did research into these two simple characters and put a lot of thought into who I believe would win, and since I'm not particularly a fan of either one of them, being unbiased came easy. Before reaching my conclusion, I actually almost gave the victory to Meryn simply because he uses heavy armor, but this advantage just couldn't outweigh that Arys being more skillful with a sword and having a better warrior mentality. In the end, it came pretty close in my mind, which I knew would mean they'd both be worn out physically from the battle. The thought of Arys fighting to the bitter end against a warrior like Arys Oakheart made me believe that he would not give up until he was dead. Meryn, on the other hand, hasn't ever really faced any real opposition, and his personality makes me believe that if he ever underestimated an opponent, his panic would cause his own downfall. Ultimately, this was the deciding factor. But if you could, please head into the comments section to let me know who you think would be the victor of these two Kingsguard knights. And while you're down there, I would love for the viewers to decide which characters will compete for future videos, so please feel free to leave a suggestion regarding that as well. This is really why I chose lackluster characters for the first video, being that I figured it would be much more fun for the viewers if they could choose the more popular matchups. So what I'm going to do is leave this video up for a while by itself to hopefully get some feedback before we get into the next fight. The only requirements for the fighters are that they must appear in the books, even if they aren't in the show. This means characters like Carl Tanner or Locke will be denied. Alternatively, Fargo Hote or Clubfoot Carl would indeed qualify. However, I'm willing to make certain exceptions for characters that would be too entertaining to deny, like the Night King. Also, please don't troll by requesting non-combative characters like Jane Poole, Patchface, or Sir Dauntus Hollard. No one wants to see that shit. Eventually, I'd like to do stuff like hold tournaments, give titles to winners that can be disputed, have teams composed of different characters battle it out, and possibly even hire out an animator to create good visuals for the viewers to give us a bit more eye candy action for these videos. I don't expect to get paid for this channel, and I do realize that it might not have too long of a lifespan, but I find this stuff very entertaining, and I'd like to reach out to others who feel the same as I do. But for now, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, please let me know who you think would win between Sir Meryn Trant and Sir Arys Oakheart in a Game of Thrones death battle. Till next time, thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you back soon. Goodbye, everybody.